I don't want to start early because people might still come in, but it's like everyone is ready, so I'll just start talking and we can go from there. So my name is Bree. I am on the board of directors with CAH. Welcome to you all. Welcome to this conference, which is on Mi'kmaq territory, the ancestral home of the Mi'kmaq peoples. And we are here for engaging lived experts in advocacy and campaigns. That is our session title. So we're going to start off with See the Person, Changing the Narrative on Homelessness Through Public Education with Tanya and Brian. So Tanya is with the North Bay Parry Sound District Health Unit. She is a community health promoter with North Bay Parry Sound District Public Health Unit in Ontario. Her energy and life purpose are focused on improving community well-being for generations to come. Tanya's work is grounded on an understanding of the social determinants of health. Her work is action through social work and public health practices, including engaging people with lived experiences of health inequities. She is a member of the Nipissing District Homelessness and Housing Partnerships Anti-Stigma Work Group. And then Brian is with The Gathering Place. Brian is a passionate advocate for people experiencing homelessness in his community. He is a lived expert who has been critical to the success of the See the Person Anti-Stigma campaign. He currently runs a shelter and works every day to give others a voice. His personal journey is one with immense struggle and resilience. He describes himself as an empath, a person who uses substances, and someone that has been homeless numerous times. Before retraining and finding his place in the mental health addiction field, he moved from town to town looking for a fresh start, too many times without success, and all while forming and losing important relationships. He is housed today, but still struggles and frustratingly witnesses the challenges of many others every day. Brian believes fostering compassion in communities by centering lived expert voices can change the narrative about homelessness and ultimately lead to system change.
Thanks, Bree. All right. Okay, can you hear me okay? All right. Yeah, this isn't nerve-wracking at all. So yes, thank you, Bree, for that warm welcome and introduction. And this has been an amazing conference. It's my first time at the CAH conference, and I love it. I want to come every year. So yeah, we're from Nipissing District, which is a somewhat small place in Northern Ontario. So we're really grateful to be here. And just off the top, I'd like to acknowledge the people with a lived experience that have been part of this campaign and thank them for their contributions. Not everyone is here today.
Hi. So we're just here to tell you about the campaign called See the Person, what we did, what it meant to be involved, and offer support for you to take similar action in your community.
Okay, so why is it important to tackle stigma? Well, we encountered a real need in our community, a need that you might see in your own community. So just for a bit of context, the See the Person campaign was developed in the middle of the pandemic. So as we were seeing homelessness become more visible, we were also seeing stigma alongside that. Also for context, we had a new and essential service, a low barrier shelter in the town of North Bay, a mid-sized city of about 50,000. The shelter was placed beside a post-secondary school. So I just tell you this as, you can kind of imagine what some of the community conversations that started to occur. Really fear-based response and a bit of othering of people who experience homelessness. So we knew that we needed to provide some balance to the conversation, which at this point was really being controlled by the media and negative comments online. So I'm sure you've probably seen that in your own communities. So we were like, all right, we got to speak up. We need to do something. And we recognize that the impacts of stigma are significant. So I work in public health, and I don't know if there are other public health folks here. Is there anybody in the room? Yeah? Okay, we'll talk later. But Health and housing go hand in hand, and public health has a role to play in furthering work around ending homelessness and having community conversations about it. So we know that social norms that include stigma, that include messages like, these people don't belong here, those are the types of messages that uphold the status quo. So if we're interested in making system change, stigma really promotes inaction on what we see as an otherwise solvable problem. So we recognize that we need to start to change the narrative about homelessness in our community.
So I was approached by my organization about getting involved with the Lived Experience Awareness Program to help share some truths about homelessness in the area. We formed a working group that met regularly, planning the program, where we were offered fair compensation for our time, where we developed the See the Person campaign. Be kind, everyone has a story. This is the message that was brought to people with lived experience, and it resonated with them, including myself. We dove into creating 2 short videos featuring people with lived experience, which we'll now share with you and give you a feel for the campaign. These were all promoted online.
Race, gender, education, all those things have an impact on how people become homeless. Just be kind and see the person.
The negative comments do nothing but hurt and perpetuate and keep the stigma going. Everybody has a story.
I came from a very abusive home. I came from foster care. And then I was homeless, not getting the basic necessities of life. And then having people abusing me on a regular basis. And that's what happens.
I was running a successful business, had a few things that came into play that shut it all down really unexpectedly, and next thing you know, I was without a home.
Try to keep in mind, that you're seeing somebody at probably the worst point in their life. It's a human being. Race, gender, education, all those things have an impact on how people become homeless. Just because.
Right. We would love to hear from Jen again, but we're going to switch to the next video. Thank you. Okay. Thanks for the applause for folks featured in the video. I'm just going to play it cool while I try to get this working. Oh, no. We can't have this one not work. Not that yours isn't great.
No, the second one is great.
The second one is
Oh,
great.
it is.
Okay. It looks like it should work. Let's see here. It doesn't want to do it in presentation mode, so let's just do it with the notes available here. No, it doesn't want to go. Oh, isn't that weird? Okay, we had tested it beforehand, but I am going to just...
I haven't had any extreme periods of being on the street, but I have been homeless on numerous occasions. Those of us with lived experience, obviously, have seen both sides, whether it be mental health, problematic drug use, or both. There's been a growth in, people with struggles in their lives more and more becoming homeless.
You walk around with this ingrained feeling of shame, right? Like all those little moments add up to a little bit of hope, right? When people treat you with dignity, because you don't feel like you deserve any.
The bottom line is that as a person, they had hopes and dreams like everyone else, and somewhere along the way that got sidetracked, and not always by their own fault, right?
What's home mean to me now? Like, it's been so long since I actually had one. Now that I have one, I feel safe. I feel like I get to grow as a human.
So I think those videos are pretty powerful and cover quite a bit of ground for the 2 minutes that they are altogether. All right, I'm going to share a bit about our campaign strategy. So I mentioned that this started in the middle of the pandemic. So we launched the campaign in late 2021. We had some funding through our local public health unit and the District of Nipissing Social Services Administration Board, and of course, support from our Community Advisory Board. Hi, Doug, our co-chair. We had $11,000 to work with to get this off the ground, so we used that for professional video services and online promotion. We were targeting adults aged 18 to 54 in Nipissing District with a focus on North Bay. We had the 2 videos developed. We did social media messaging and a social media toolkit for our community partners to share the messaging. We have a campaign webpage, which we will point you to a little later. We had Google and Facebook ads, bus ads. We had a media release, which we received a lot of attention from that. And we also did a series of community presentations. So I'm going to share a bit about our community presentations because that's where we were able to, like I mentioned, we wanted to cover a lot of ground with this that are like, okay, how do we talk about like the key drivers of homelessness, the solutions to homelessness, how do we talk about intersecting stigmas and all of these core concepts. So these next few slides are really just sharing some of our kind of sub-messaging or secondary messaging where we use these community presentations to expand on these concepts. So we, in an 8-week period, met with 450 people in our community. They were mainly health and social service providers, but some also included some local decision makers. And they allowed us to talk about housing as a human right. So some of this is new information for the people that we were bringing it to. We would talk about how when it comes to stigma, blame is often placed on individuals for their situation. Am I right? Yeah. And how this fails to recognize the broader factors outside of one's control. So we were really intentional about talking about the structural factors at play and some of the key drivers of homelessness. So we'd, exchange and conversation with community members about the link between adverse childhood experiences and homelessness. We talk about poverty in our community. What does that look like? Impacts of colonization and structural racism. The lack of affordable housing. Just really pointing to, there are some pieces that are outside of an individual's control that limit the way they move in their community and lives. And another piece was violence. So we really wanted to make it clear that there's a link between homelessness and these bigger structural factors that can be modified through healthy public policy. So we would share this message that homelessness is not a personal choice, it's a policy choice. And I think I've heard that a few times over the last couple of days. And I think it's really important to let folks know this and that they can be part of the solution. So we'd also talk about concepts like intersecting stigmas, just to give people a sense of the multiple layers of stigma that someone can be moving through the community with, whether they're identity-related stigmas or health-related stigmas. We talk about the various forms of stigma and their impacts and have some examples alongside those. So I shared these last few slides as an example of the presentation that we have available for adaptation.
So we're just asking folks to be part of the solution and take action. through compassion.
Okay.
Through compassion, everyday acts of kindness, using person-first language, education, promote positive messaging, encourage those to learn more about housing and homelessness, cultural safety, and the impacts of colonization, and advocacy. Just speak up, reach out to elected officials, ask and talk about housing solutions.
Vote.
And vote, yeah, absolutely vote. So what was the feedback from our community? So 4 in 5 people surveyed felt the campaign message was relative and important to share in their community. Did the campaign change attitudes and behaviors towards people experiencing homelessness? Well, 50% reflected on their attitudes. Nearly half reflected on how they interact with people. 30% of those thought about changing their attitudes about and or how they interact with people experiencing homelessness. 78% preferred to hear from people with lived experience. And 95% agreed or strongly agreed that it was impactful to hear from people with lived experience. And all of the presentations were allied with folks that also do have lived experience as well. So how I got involved. So the power of peer support roles in creating community change. Peers make everything a bit more realistic. They're able to point out deficiencies and gaps other people don't think about. Someone can say something like, there's plenty of food services in town, and truly believe it, whereas a peer can clarify why that might not be so straightforward. They can explain how some people with mobility issues may not be able to attend, explain how some people living in tents may have been displaced and may need to move their belongings during meal times. They explain there could be conflicts between individuals who are using the services and cannot always attend due to negative interactions with others. Things they themselves have already experienced. When a peer talks to someone struggling with housing, addictions, poor mental health, etc., they know the struggles they face daily. They know what it's like to be cold and wet, not have warm clothes to change into, nothing to drink, nowhere to use the washroom, no tobacco. All things that can either make someone's day that much better or that much worse. There is trust and respect that can only be gained through experience. When I was working with a harm reduction case manager through my journey of sobriety, I once spoke about doing things I was ashamed of. I mentioned having stolen alcohol or money from family to feed my addiction. My case manager, also a peer, said nothing. He just hung his head in shame. Not that he was disappointed in me or my actions, but more of a recollection of his. He felt that same shame and disbelief I did. This was a powerful moment that made me feel human. What your personal experience has been working on this campaign. So the experience has been eye-opening for myself. We began promoting the program through various agencies in town that helped the population that we work with. Much of the materials we shared with the attendees was new information. The stats and information we shared was previously unknown to the groups. This was a surprise to me, as I felt many mental health workers would know all this. Before doing the presentations, I felt we were just preaching to the choir, that most people working with this population would know this information already, but it wasn't the case. We helped many people who provide support to others gain new insight into what struggles people are actually facing and why. I found the campaign informative. Many of the stats and information we used was new to me as well. Learning about some factors that might be preventing the folks we help from succeeding has aided me in directing them appropriately. Acknowledging their struggles with housing, asking for support, working through mental health challenges, etc., properly to navigate them to the resources they need. These statistics also gave me points to help the general public understand the real struggles for many. That not all those struggling with housing face the same challenges, that many different issues need to be addressed in order for successes to be made.
Great. Thank you, Brian, for sharing that. Maybe just a hand for Brian. I think that's hard to do. Thank you. So a bit about next steps. So our our campaign is continuing. We are focusing on building some new resources. So I should mention that we recognize the limitation of our videos, that we don't have a lot of diversity in the videos, the couple of videos that we have. So this was a situation where we really actually recruited people, peer support workers from the community. It was the middle of the pandemic. We were like, hey, who could talk about this? Who's in a safe place to be able to share some experience? So that's one of the things that we're kind of bringing forward in our next phase of this campaign, is that we'd like to have more diversity in terms of age, race, and gender. So we're building some new resources. Our community partners have identified a need for some myth-busting resources, a parent guide, so some key messages for parents. So we're seeing a shift of parents not sending their kids, including, so this personally affects me and my kids, not sending their kids to this one high school because of the service that is close by. So we've been doing some education with that school and the students within that school, and we'd like to empower parents with the skills and knowledge to be able to have conversations with their kids about these health and social issues that can be tough to talk about. So we want to engage in community and be really intentional about who we're reaching out to, and revisit local decision makers. So if you are interested in taking similar action, doing some work around stigma in your community, that kind of spans from the compassion-based, rights-based message all the way to advocacy, all the ground we tried to cover with this, please reach out to us and visit our website at myhealthunit.ca/housing4all. We have put together some adaptable materials and some further information about the campaign on our website. So there's a presentation template, some sample social media messages, web page content, like a lot of supporting good evidence-based content there, and some sample campaign questions to ask your community to measure how successful your campaign was at changing attitudes and behaviors. And you can gather a lot of information. All right, so we encourage you, if you're interested in the key message and our materials, please check them out. Recognize that our materials were built with people in our community. So I've taken a lot of the imagery out. So you need to use your imagination. What could this look like in your own community if you were to build something with individuals with lived experience in your community? So thank you very much, and remember, see the person, be kind, everyone has a story. And there's our website again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, dear, sorry. We're doing a similar campaign in the Northwest Territories, and they plan to plagiarize this shamelessly. All right. Our next presenter will be Jessica, who is here from the Calgary Alpha House Society to present Shifting Public Opinion, Engaging Vulnerable Persons. Jessica is originally from Nova Scotia, born and raised in the Annapolis Valley. She currently lives in Calgary, where she is the Community Engagement Program Manager for Calgary Alpha House Society. She also participates in Kindred Connection Society's Families Together program as a child engagement volunteer, and with the Alberta Rescue Foundation as a foster for rescued animals. Her passion and her special interest within the context of her work is contributing to building stronger communities by reducing the stigmas surrounding trauma and mental health. And she says very slowly, but I think it's good work, working towards a master's in applied counseling, which she hopes to use towards furthering that work. And I think as long as you get there, that counts.
Sorry, I'm just going to make my notes bigger so I can read them properly. All right. Okay, well, thank you for joining me here today. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the power of community engagement and the role that educating communities can play in shifting public perspective, changing narratives, and building communities where we can all feel safe, supported, and accepted. To provide a little bit of background for, to provide a little bit of background for those of you who don't know us. There we go, sorry. Alpha House was established in 1981 as a committed response to a growing number of marginalized individuals who were addicted to alcohol or other substances and living vulnerably on the streets of Calgary. Our mission is to provide safe and caring environments for those individuals whose lives have been impacted by alcohol and other substances. And since our inception in 1981, we are proud to have grown significantly and to have developed the capacity and programming to be able to support these individuals on their journey towards improved health and stability through a variety of different avenues. Our agency's values include meeting people exactly where they're at, and what you're looking at on the screen here are the programs and services that allow us to do that. So as you can see, we have a high intox shelter, which is open 24/7, 365, and obviously staffed as such to support clients with whatever needs they have while they're staying with us. We also have a medically supported withdrawal management program co-located in our shelter building, which is available by self-referral, and there's no requirement for clients to ever have been a part of our shelter program or any of our other programs in order to be eligible to attend detox. We also have 2 housing streams, which are both harm reduction-based models. Our community housing program is for clients who have a higher level of independence and are not necessarily in need of the more intensive case management style that we provide to clients in our permanent supportive housing stream. Permanent supportive housing obviously is staffed 24/7, 365 to support higher acuity clients who tend to have a higher number of comorbidities or complexities relating to their addiction, physical or mental health. And we do have a total of 9 outreach programs as well, which are organized under these 4 kind of more main categories that are listed on the screen here. All of our outreach teams are mobile community responses. Some teams are on the road 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And some of these outreach programs also include partnerships with 911, 211, the Calgary Police, City Bylaw, Calgary Transit, the Calgary Fire Department, and business improvement areas around the downtown core. So now that you have a little bit more information and a little bit more insight as to what we're up to as an agency, you can probably imagine that as an agency of our size, who is supporting members of a highly visible demographic of the vulnerable population right there at that intersection of homelessness and addiction, also means that we tend to have a high degree of visibility within the community as an agency. We're quite a large agency, and we are out there in the community. So our shelter, our vans, our staff are all really recognizable and pretty well-known elements of Calgary's urban landscape. So because of the size of us, the length of time that we've been in operation, and that higher degree of visibility that we tend to have, people from the community do tend to reach out to us when they do have questions, concerns, or issues regarding experiences with the vulnerable population. So oftentimes we hear from folks who are very empathetic and supportive and who understand that people who are living vulnerably are basically living in a state of crisis, and they really want to help these people out, but they just don't know how. Or we also hear from folks who are angry and frustrated with issues related to substance use and homelessness, and they want solutions, they want answers, they want to have their feelings heard and validated. And oftentimes, though, what we really hear is a combination of both of those things. But regardless of whether we're receiving positive feedback or complaints, what we're really hearing in the feedback that we're getting from communities is that people actually really, really care. They're very invested in what's happening in their city around them. And for us, that lies an opportunity It's an opportunity for us to leverage the visibility that our agency has in the community to engage with folks out there in the community as recognized experts in our field, to encourage dialogue and to present information and ideas in a new and constructive way, which could then potentially influence a shift in public perception. So the big question there is, how do we start with that? Like, how do we even approach doing this? So we're very well aware that attitudes of fear and intolerance often stem from a lack of knowledge or understanding. We all have heard that famous Andrew Smith quote before, that people fear what they don't understand and hate what they can't conquer, and it's very true in this context as well. The reason for that is that a lack of understanding is often representative for people of a lack of control. So how do we restore the sense of control or confidence in people in the community? How do we seize this opportunity that's presented itself to us and use it to influence public perception and encourage a departure from negative perceptions, biases, and a fear mindset towards empathy, inclusivity, and creating tangible positive change? Well, we do that by empowering people with understanding. So supporting people at the community level in understanding the challenges that our clients face, the factors that contribute to their experiences, and how the system of support that surrounds them actually works, by providing people with a solid base of knowledge is really key to developing social cohesion and empathy. And the development of those things is really what's key to influencing a larger, more significant shift in public perception. Community members who are armed with the confidence of knowledge on an issue are more likely to engage in conversations about it. They're more likely to share that information with people around them. They're more likely to advocate for support for issues connected to that information. And so arming people with that knowledge is arming them with the power to help us in creating that positive and sustainable change that we're looking for. So for us at Alpha House, the vehicle that we're using to share that knowledge and support the development of understanding is our EVP, or Engaging Vulnerable Persons workshop. So the EVP is a workshop that is pretty detailed. It runs anywhere from 60 to 75 minutes in length, depending on how in tune I am with my mental notes on that day. So obviously I'm not able to present it to you today because of our time limitation, but what I'm going to do instead is break down the key concepts that we've included in our presentation and talk a little bit about what our approach was to actually developing the presentation in the first place and how this has impacted our relationship with our community. So our first step to developing the EVP, just like with any project, it was really important for us to identify our why. What were our goals? What major challenges in perception were we really hoping to overcome? And what factors are influencing those broader negative perceptions? For everyone here working in the homeless serving sector, everyone will be very well acquainted with all of these challenges. These are not unique to our agency or our city at all. But when we looked at the feedback that we were getting, like the questions, the complaints, and the negative perceptions that we were hearing just in the subtext of conversations that were happening, not even just directed at our agency, but in the community in general, the specific complaints or issues themselves varied, but what you see here is really what we consider to be the main categories or broader topics that all of those complaints sort of tended to fall under. So in our EVP workshop, which you'll see coming up here, we address each of these broader issues, but by including what we perceive to be the information necessary to promote that understanding and encourage new ways of thinking that we would hope would ultimately influence people's perception in a more positive way. And before we get into it, I'll just say as a caveat that it's really important when we're putting together information to share with members of the broader community that the work that we do is very, very specialized, and it's important not to take that for granted because as I started presenting this EVP, like what seemed like very obvious information and like common sense stuff to me, I discovered was very eye-opening and new information to a lot of members of the community that I was speaking to. So that's just a very important fact or like thought to keep in mind as we go forward. So first up is that there's a general lack of understanding around the homeless serving system, how it works, and what it does. And what happens here is this contributes to the perception that nothing is actually being done beyond what people can see with their own eyes. So we were often hearing comments like, oh yeah, I saw a guy hunched over in the alley there, and I called one of your outreach teams, and when they got there, all they did was give the guy a sandwich and leave. Like, what use is that? But we know, in reality, that when our outreach teams respond to a call like that, we are doing a lot more than handing out a sandwich. When our teams pull up to a client, what actually happens is a lot of things are going on all at once. We're doing a really quick, acute assessment of a client's well-being. We're making sure they're not in crisis, that they're not overdosing, that they don't have a wound or frostbite or anything else that requires medical attention. We're doing housing check-ins with them to ensure that they keep their place on the housing wait lists. We're making sure that they have basic needs supplies, which sometimes include sandwiches. We're checking on them to make sure that they have a place to go. We're offering them a ride or transport to a safer, warmer, drier place to stay. And that's not even an exhaustive list of everything that we offer to our clients. That would just be a very basic rundown of a typical interaction that we would have. So, yeah, to a person who has no knowledge or understanding of the work that we do, it might look like all we did was hand out a sandwich. And like the optics of that makes it very easy for a person to commit themselves to the idea that we're not really doing anything effective. So that's why it's so important to talk people through the key points that you see here. We want them to understand that there's a lot more going on than what they're able to see at a superficial level to alleviate these frustrations and these perceptions that nothing is actually happening. Like of all the EVP workshops that I've ever led, I've never presented this information without people, like somebody being like, oh wow, I had no idea that you guys did all that. And that is the point. That's exactly what we want to hear from people. So NIMBYism obviously is a really huge one as well. As an agency with well over 300 clients across our housing programs, it's very important for us to educate community not only on what Housing First is, but why it's so important. It's really easy for members in the community to see a building that's very clearly housing a group of people who actively use substances and view it as some form of enabling or in some other type of negative light. But explaining the philosophy of Housing First helps people to understand why it's important to afford individuals the safety of stability, how significantly that can improve their ability to then address factors contributing negatively to their health or other circumstances. And then, of course, in terms of effectiveness, everyone deserves the right to safe and stable housing. We hate to reduce it to a matter of dollars and cents and statistics, but the reality is the numbers are what count for a lot of people. So we all know Housing First programs are very effective, and the social return on investment in housing programs is very positive. So we include that information as well. There's also no denying that stigma surrounding homelessness and addiction definitely exists. Again, though, the key to overcoming this is by offering those new perspectives to these issues and offering folks some background knowledge about the weight that these items that we have on the screen here carry and the impact that they play on the way an individual interacts and views not only the world around them, but also how these stigmas can impact a person's internalized view of themselves and act as a barrier to accessing services or engaging with supports. Stigma equals shame, and shame causes us to withdraw and isolate. So we discuss each of these points in an effort to move past stigmatization and remove psychosocial barriers that come along with stigma for the folks that we support. Double standards and biases are also a huge one, and they're very important to discuss. And by doing so, we really hope that the people attending our sessions are going to be encouraged to look inward at their own internalized biases and give a little bit of deeper thought to where these certain feelings or assumptions that we carry with us actually come from. So some of our biases are so deeply ingrained in our social schema that we don't stop to think about where they came from at all. It's like when you're growing up and your parents told you to do something that didn't make sense to you, and you would ask them why, and they would say, because it's just the way it is. Double standards and biases kind of run on that same model. You know, we stigmatize and shame individuals who use drugs, but we condone and even glamorize alcohol, even though it's an incredibly dangerous and addictive substance that causes well over 50,000 preventable alcohol-related deaths in Canada every year. So how can people who are strongly opposed to the existence of safe consumption sites then pull up a stool at their local bar on a Friday night and consume alcohol, which is a regulated substance, in a consumption site that is regulated for the consumer's safety? These are the kinds of things that we really need to encourage deeper thought and conversation around. Because right now we're giving them the old because that's just the way it is, and I think that all of us can do better. And to do better and to get there, sometimes it's as simple as just shining a light on a topic that we wouldn't normally pay much attention to, you know, blowing dust off old ideas and getting that new conversation going. So, like I mentioned before, you know, we fear what we don't understand, and hopefully by this point in our presentation, our audience is feeling like they understand our clients a little bit more, they understand the challenges that our clients are facing a little bit more. We would have, at this point in the presentation, also shared some anecdotes about our work with our clients and a few stories. We will hopefully have humanized the work that we do and the clients that we serve in this way. So also by this point in the conversation, we're hoping that our audience has opened up a little bit to the idea of challenging their own perceptions and their own preconceived notions. And now we can kind of continue along that same thread and discuss the roles that perception and perceived fear can play in our feelings of safety. So these points are kind of where we challenge people to ask themselves, you know, is the person that I'm walking past on the sidewalk right now actually a threat? Or is it my own biases that are causing me to feel fear when I walk past this unhoused person? Is making eye contact with that person panhandling over there and giving them a smile and a hello actually really that scary? For some people it is, and we need to talk about why. So to further encourage confidence in interactions and to further dispel these feelings of fear, we also offer people some really practical engagement techniques. We want to provide people with the tools that are going to help them feel confident in guiding an interaction in a positive direction, and the tools that are going to allow them to engage with folks confidently and safely and from that trauma-informed lens. So at this point in the presentation, again, we've already worked on encouraging knowledge and understanding of all of these challenges that our clients face, but what we still need to talk about is how we can directly apply this empathy and understanding as a foundation for confident and positive interactions. So the way that we do this is by including in our presentation some of the key concepts and techniques that all of our teams at Alpha House are trained on. And that training comes from CPI's Nonviolent Crisis Intervention training. So we don't go through the entire training, but what we do is address some key concepts that folks can apply to their interactions in everyday life that hopefully will give them a little bit more confidence and a little bit more understanding of how to positively engage with folks. So the key concepts that we do include are verbal, paraverbal, and nonverbal or physical approaches when engaging with a person who is maybe, for example, you come to work one day and there's an unhoused person who's like sleeping right at the doorway of your work, and you're not sure if they're okay and you want to check on them, but you don't know how. These techniques are how our teams would approach the situation in order to engage with that person safely and respectfully. So our ultimate hope is that by sharing everything that I've kind of just gone over, folks ultimately will feel more confident and in control, which will result in those feelings of fear dissipating and the shift in perception becoming more positive. Delivery. We deliver this presentation both as an in-person workshop and virtually online. And we're really fortunate to have grown some really wonderful community partnerships in Calgary. We've had some space donated to us where we hold two free monthly sessions for community at one of our local community hubs. And we promote generally through social media, but again, through our community partnerships, we've been donated some ad space as well. We've got a big billboard up right now advertising this. And it's been really great for our agency because when we're offering it to community groups or nonprofits, we don't charge anything, but we also get requests from corporations and private businesses who would like to train their staff. And we will either set a fee for those presentations or encourage a donation in exchange for the presentation. Word of mouth has also been a huge one for us. We always get inquiries from people who are like, oh, my friend or my colleague attended a previous session and now I'm really interested. So that's been wonderful as well. And at the end of the day, the participants of our EVP workshop are not the only ones learning. So at the end of our workshop, we ask that attendees complete a short survey, and that gives participants the opportunity to provide us with feedback about what they've just learned that we actually take into consideration and apply to the workshop. So the workshop is kind of like a living, breathing organism. We're constantly updating it and adding things that people are indicating to us would be more relevant or helpful to them. So as an example, through participant feedback, we learned that a lot of people felt it would be really beneficial to them if we walked them through specific scenarios that they've experienced in their real life and give them advice about how one of our teams might have handled that situation. So after hearing that feedback, we've now included a scenario-focused portion at the end of our presentation, and the feedback from that has been that everyone really enjoys it and finds it really valuable. So the message here is that the most important aspect of community engagement is being open to not only listening to what the community has to say, but actually hearing them and be willing to make that feedback a consideration in terms of how you're presenting information to them going forward. Feedback is a really valuable tool. And being able to acknowledge where it can be productively applied helps us to continue to make the EVP more relevant to the needs of the community as we go along, and to ensure that we're addressing these challenges and negative perceptions in the community as effectively as possible in order to push that public perception in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Okay. Just gonna switch gears here. Is it okay if we save questions for the end and we'll do it all together?
Okay, I must have missed it somewhere along the way in scribbling things, but this acronyms are us, you don't get these. But anyways, EVP, what is that?
It's the Engaging Vulnerable Persons workshop.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, so next we have Ashley, who will be presenting on knowledge mobilization, scholarship translation, and adapting to your audience, transforming your research to engage and persuade. Excuse me. So Ashley is an experienced communications professional with a master's in communications and technology. As a young adult, she experienced various forms of houselessness, which has shaped the person she is today. She is passionate about finding new solutions and ending houselessness. The focus of her master's capstone research was on communications channels and challenges for unhoused people finding support resources. In addition, she's developed a self-directed study regarding knowledge mobilization and scholarship translation for stories regarding houselessness using an original autoethnography about her experiences living unhoused. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today to discuss how you can transform your research on houselessness to engage and persuade your audience. Okay, so just a quick presentation overview. First, I'll say a little bit about myself, hopefully not more than what you've already heard. And then I'll define 2 key terms used in my presentation title, which acted as guiding concepts for the entire project. I'll then jump into the project itself, what it was, and how I made various decisions in areas like storytelling and imagery. Finally, I'll talk about the project result and how I transformed a 28-page autoethnographic research paper into a series of short TikTok videos. At the end, if I've saved enough time, I have a section of my autoethnography that I can share. So a little bit about me, and mostly an opportunity to show you a picture of my cat. So my name is Ashley Carbonero. I experienced transient houselessness from 17 to 20 years old and then lived at risk for years after that. Having a bit more luck than others in my community, I found stable housing and eventually went on to university. I started off with a legal assistant certificate and then moved to a bachelor's and then a master's in communications. Today, I work at the U of A, University of Alberta, as a communications associate. Okay, so some key terms. So knowledge mobilization, as I'm sure some of you may already know, it's essentially a fancy way of saying getting your research out there. But if we look at the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council definition, knowledge mobilization is an umbrella term covering a range of activities regarding producing and using research results. So some examples include synthesis, dissemination, communication, transfer, exchange, and more. Scholarship translation is similar to knowledge mobilization, but involves bringing theory and research to wider audiences and communities of practice. It's how researchers communicate information in ways that are most beneficial for their target audience. So that could look like a video, an infographic, a short story, or even a comic strip. It could even mean revising your research so it's in plain language. Your focus here is on the audience and their ability to understand your research. Almost swallowed an ice cube there. Okay, so why does this all matter? What was I trying to do here? So for some context, the basis of this presentation came from a self-directed study I did as part of my master's degree during fall 2022. As I was preparing to write my graduating capstone paper, I was reading a lot of different studies on houselessness and reflecting a lot on my own experiences. I decided I wanted to explore concepts around identity and houselessness, and my supervisor, Katie Campbell from University of Alberta, recommended writing an autoethnography. Wanting to bring together some more of my professional experience, I decided I also wanted to create a strategic communications plan to share my research with others. So today I'm sharing the theory and the knowledge that led to my decisions in creating this plan so that you can be prepared to share your own research as well. As part of my strategy, I looked at why storytelling was the best method for this project. As a research method, autoethnography allows a researcher to use real-life experiences as data for theoretical analysis. Although I used my own experiences, some autoethnographic stories will share their participants' stories using that same narrative method. In choosing storytelling, however, I also came across two concepts that confirmed my decision: social penetration theory and the elaboration likelihood model. Social penetration theory explores how individuals form bonds and interpersonal relationships through self-disclosure. This theory emphasizes how self-disclosure penetrates relationship layers, moving beyond surface level bonds to intimate and personal level bonds. Elaboration likelihood model explores how individuals view messages through two routes, the central or the peripheral. In the central route, individuals are engaged with the message and likely to elaborate on the subject matter. But in the peripheral route, cues can be used to motivate and persuade individuals to engage more extensively with the message. If we take these two concepts together, a person may positively respond to a storytelling format that uses self-disclosure, such as autoethnography. And self-disclosure itself may act as a cue that can motivate individuals in the peripheral route to think more extensively over your content. Moving on to audience. As a communication best practice, it's always good to know who your audience is while you're creating your strategy. For me and this project, I was looking at people who were on TikTok and people who were interested in EDI and social justice. Because the profile was basically me, I didn't really need to write anything down there, but I do recommend it. So although I had chosen my channel, I still wanted to make sure it was a good fit for my audience. I found studies indicating that TikTok was a good place to find easy to understand information, and a marketing survey that stated 3/4 of respondents who were in Generation Z said the platform helped them to learn about social justice and politics. I think the biggest insight for choosing your channel is that people communicate differently based on the channel they're on. So you need to find the channel that works the best for you. As a side note, for my capstone research, I read a study on the high engagement of an R housing subreddit, which led to me using Reddit to recruit my interview participants. Because I had too high of a response, I actually had to close the post after only 3 days. So recommend trying something new, and you might be a little surprised. Going back to my channel decisions, because I wrote a 28-page paper and ultimately wanted people to read the whole thing after seeing the short videos, I decided to also look at publishing and then publishing platforms, which led me to another platform, Medium. I chose Medium because it had a high number of active users and an existing base of long-form content readers, which created an additional opportunity for people to find my research. Choosing imagery was by far the hardest part of this project, but I was determined to create TikTok videos, so I explored how I could use imagery ethically. My biggest finding was that your design choices can reduce or exacerbate the dehumanization of houseless people. In one study, researchers analyzed the framing of unhoused individuals in US media and looked at factors such as eye contact, naming the subject, inclusion of stereotypical homeless items, and the placement of the image compared to the content. The author confirmed the presence of stigma perpetuation through photography that framed houselessness as an individual issue rather than a social or systemic one. This research revealed a need to shift representation of unhoused individuals to show them as full human beings, and that the rehumanization of unhoused people through imagery was necessary to harness the support needed for forward-thinking policy change. In another study, researchers wanted to learn how both pro- and anti-homeless policies could simultaneously be supported by the public and enacted, despite having contradictory goals. This research looked at something called disease cues and how the presence of them could trigger a person's sensitivities around getting sick, which behaviorally would cause them to want to create a barrier between them and the presence of those cues. Some of the things mentioned by researchers included visible dirt under a person's fingernails or tooth decay. I don't really like the connotation of calling these disease cues in relation to unhoused people, so I'll just call them cues. But essentially this study highlights why showing how bad homelessness can get may be counterintuitive to your goals. So if you're picking between two images, for instance, and one person has someone smiling, and the other shows them looking highly disheveled, and you want to pick the one where they're looking disheveled, perhaps ask yourself why and what you hope to gain from showing that perspective. In this instance, the research suggests that you actually won't gain much support using this method. So while it isn't always possible to avoid stereotypical images or cues, being aware of their impact will help you make better decisions about the imageries that you're using. So choosing the wrong imagery can have greater impacts. Beyond stigma, when we're only shown a few views of what it is like to be houseless, people may not see themselves as houseless when they actually are. This is something I experienced personally. Moreover, resources may not be tailored to meet the needs of the entire community. As many of us know, certain demographics, such as women, trans, and non-binary people, may be more likely to experience hidden homelessness. So when people in these groups aren't visiting spaces for support resources, and images such as these frame homelessness as a male issue, it could lead to nonprofits prioritizing needs for certain individuals over others, despite there being a high demographic in other areas. Overall, the key takeaway is be intentional, be respectful, and as wild as a concept as it is, ask permission. Just because you can take a photo of someone in a public space, it really doesn't mean you should. Okay. So at the end of the project, I used my research and data to create 5 original TikTok videos. The videos used existing trending TikTok sounds, which I intentionally chose to help elevate the visibility of my videos on that platform. Each video shared a piece of my story with information on how to view more. I'm sure at this point the big question is whether I actually posted them, and the answer is almost. So I greatly underestimated the courage it would take to share these videos and my stories with others. I did post to Medium this morning, so yay. And that's linked on my website, which will be in one of the following slides. And I also have a mock video of one of the TikTok videos I created on there for you to look at as well. So before I move into the piece of my autoethnography I wanted to share, I just wanted to leave you with this quote. So as the communication menu grows, we need not view the options as dichotomous choices, but instead pick and choose among them to meet the needs of different people at different times for different topics. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share a piece of my autoethnography right now, and my website and my email is on this slide if you'd like to reach out or anything or learn more. Hey, kid, I already told you you can't sleep in here. A sharp voice ripped me back into reality. This was another memory from later that night, and another moment I'm often brought back to. Maybe it's time for you to go, she repeated, coming closer and lowering her voice. Where was the first word that came to my head. The second was order. I stared at her, emotionless and perplexed as math equations flipped through my head. Just as her mouth twitched to form the words to break me from, as she saw it, a daze, I spit out, "Can I get a plate of fries?" Her mouth shifted into a thin line and she looked me up and down and side to side. Fine, she replied flatly. And some more coffee and, I hesitated, and water please. She grunted and turned before walking to a machine in the center of the diner and punching a few buttons. I watched as she picked up a coffee pot and circled back towards me. I moved my empty coffee cup over to the edge of the table. Without a word, she poured the coffee into my cup, stopping half an inch before the top. I looked up at her to thank her when she said, "Do you need more cream and sugar?" I glanced down at the sugar container. It was bare with a few yellow sativa packets. Beside me was a plate with my empty cream container tower I had created a couple hours ago. "Yes, please, thank you." I flashed a pithy smile. "You're welcome," she replied with an icy stare. I looked over to the window. Outside, the trees were swaying among spiraling snowflakes. As beautiful as the night looked, I knew the temperature outside was unforgiving, and my only choice was to stay inside this 24-hour diner for as long as possible, or at least until the buses started running again. I'd find somewhere else to go soon, I can remember thinking. It's over 10 years later, and I'm sitting on my couch with my laptop on a riser on the coffee table in front of me. I hear a commotion and look up to see my 10-year-old cat, Pepe, dart from across the room and through his nylon tunnels on the living room floor. The smell of bacon and eggs seeps into the living room from the kitchen, and I can hear the sound of sizzling from the other room. "It'll be ready soon," Michael says with a grin, walking past me to sit at his computer desk stationed behind the couch. I'm now in my second year of my master's degree in communication. In the previous semester, when we had to prepare a poster presentation on the topic of our graduating capstone research, I decided I would write my research on communication strategies to reaching people experiencing houselessness. On my laptop, I double-click the desktop folder titled Papers and see a chaotic list of papers unsorted and all formatted differently. Writing my capstone on houselessness came with many unexpected challenges. Not only was I reflecting on moments I thought I had left in the past, I was now reading about the houseless experience through, at times, the cold academic who, I suppose in theory, understands houselessness and how people living without housing might behave. In 1987, researchers Snow and Anderson conducted a year-long ethnographic study on identity talk among homeless communities in Austin, Texas. In place of positive social utility and moral worth, the researchers identified 3 strategies unhoused people use to cope with stigma and build and maintain self-worth: distancing themselves from other unhoused people, embracing the unhoused identity, and fictitious storytelling or fantasizing about the future. Back in the diner, if you had asked me if I was unhoused, I probably would have said no. My situation was temporary. I'll find somewhere to go, I remember thinking. Snow and Anderson also talked about this in their research. The feeling that this was fleeting, the feeling that this was a fleeting moment, a brief check stop in the journey to the next chapter of my life, or whatever cliche fits here. It wouldn't take me long to realize I was wrong, that this part of my life wasn't actually temporary. It would, however, take me another year or so to accept it. Thank you.
Is this working? There we go. Any questions?
I just want to thank you all and thank this panel for happening. I've been kind of frustrated all conference that we're not talking enough about systemic hate and how it causes so many issues for so much of our work in the field. And I come from Cambridge, where we have people flying drones, vigilante style, and setting tents on fire. So I get really concerned about the lengths that hate can lead. I'm wondering, for the campaigns that you have led, how do they intersect with those, or address those very problematic behaviors like harassment, like leveraging political powers, and did they address or explore like even systemic behaviors? I think about like being a bad landlord or investing in property. And also the second question on top of that is, for either of the campaigns that you've read, has there been conversations with like bylaw teams, elected officials, police on like disrupting those complaints as they're coming to them in the first place?
That was a lot of questions. That was a lot. I should be writing this down.
Well, I can say that some of our outreach teams do have partnerships, and we work very closely with the Calgary Police and.
Can you speak closer to the mic, sorry, Jess?
Sorry, it's not. Some of our outreach teams and our programs do work very closely with the Calgary Police, and there is a shift in the way that they approach members of the vulnerable population, and they've kind of moved away from that enforcement approach and more towards an approach of acceptance and a mental health focus. So when they are receiving calls from community that should not be approached from an enforcement lens, I think that is being communicated more often now, and those kinds of calls are being diverted to our teams who approaches from more of a support stance. So that is definitely happening in Calgary for sure.
So I also know in North Bay, Ontario, where we're at, we just, again, the police have been doing a lot more work with mental health education. They've also reallocated $150,000 from the police department and have done a pilot project of promoting outreach workers set up with security as well, so that someone can go and provide support. The security guard is there, just to support the other person as well. But that's only been a few months, and the changes that we've seen in our city have been significant. It's been a very, very positive program, and people are very happy to see that there's been great changes, and they're supporting it.
Other questions? Okay.
Hi there. Thank you all, especially Brian and Ashley, for sharing sort of your stories, but it's very useful. And I'm just wondering, particularly with the North Perry Bay, but also Ashley, with what you were saying, like how do you, what did you put in place to protect the people you were asking to participate, or in what ways did you provide social and psychological safety for people with lived experience so they could participate?
So I felt supported throughout the whole thing. The fact that we were doing the program with other folks with lived experience, and that we all do work in the field as well, was very helpful, because we do see that our lived experience is very valuable for helping people in the future. So there wasn't a lot of shame. I did feel very nervous in the beginning about exposing myself in my community, because a lot of my homelessness or struggles with housing happened when I lived out of town. And when I did come into town, I was at shelters, or I was not really visible by any means. So to let my community know, in fact, the school that we talked about was this high school that I attended. And not that any of the teachers or students are there anymore, but some of the students became teachers, and here I am telling my story to folks. But the amount of support that I got from people, the very first day that we put this program out, a friend of mine called me from Creston, BC, and he said, "Brian, I didn't realize you're in this situation. I have a job and a house for you. All you have to do is get here." And I'm like, honestly, it's been a few years. I'm good now, but thanks so much. And it just really has been supportive more than anything.
You might be able to do it.
For me, it was a little bit different. I was obviously forcing myself to do this. So for that experience, I guess it doesn't really apply. But for my graduating capstone research paper, I interviewed houseless people. And I took a bunch of steps to ensure that they felt safe during the entire process. So one thing my studies, my literature review showed me was that allowing people to choose the location that they're interviewed in really helps with building comfort. So I gave them a list of options that were suitable under my ethics, and then allowed them to pick. I also sent the questions in advance, just in case that they didn't want to ask, they didn't want me to ask anything in particular. They wanted to think about their answers. There was a couple of people that were that worked in the industry, and they also wanted to be able to ask their employers. So giving the questions in advance really helped in that situation. And I also prepared it didn't actually end up getting used, but I did prepare a little worksheet, a little one-page document on mental health resources, just in case anyone throughout the interview felt triggered and needed some additional support. Yeah. Sure.
Thanks. I think we used a lot of the same strategies that you did, providing the questions in advance, being, again, the choice, too, was another piece in terms of where we were filming. Another piece was ensuring people had adequate time for preparing, right? And that they were being compensated for that time if they so chose to accept that. I attended the filming of so for our video production, I attended the filming as a support person. And what else have we done? Getting feedback. So when we received, I received initially the first edit of the videos. I was like, hey, okay, all right, these are pretty emotional. I'm gonna put these back. We're gonna put these back out and make sure that these feel comfortable for everyone. So all of our anyone that was engaged had an opportunity to review those and approve of them moving ahead. So they had the final say on what the products look like in the end, including the social media messaging. So those were some ways that we've supported. Have I supported you in any other way?
Other questions? Oh, at the back. I'm coming. I just made more poor choices with footwear this morning, so, yeah.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate hearing what you've shared today. It runs very deeply because we see in our communities every day the vulnerability that it takes and the strength that it takes for many of the people that are unhoused just to function. And so the brilliance of you coming forward and sharing your story is so commendable and kind and wonderful, and thank you for sharing a piece of yourself with us today. My question actually has to do with children and how, if we're making videos or we're creating content or we're trying to support young people, when you had mentioned about, kids at the school, and I'm curious how we can help be proactive when we use the right language in classrooms, and can we find solutions or materials that are age appropriate that might also help the dialogue as we move forward 10 years from now and they're adults as well. Any thoughts?
As a learning and advocacy tool, we obviously as a nonprofit apply for every grant that we possibly can, and we received a grant for art funding, and we use that art funding to work with an animation studio and develop a very accessible and easy to understand video that explains pretty much the presentation that I just discussed up here, but in a way that's maybe a little bit easier for people who would be younger to understand, not quite as in-depth as the presentation that you'd be giving to adults. So I think maybe thinking outside the box and creating projects that are maybe a little bit more imaginative is a helpful way to go.
Thanks for the question. So interestingly, we had a plan to go to this particular secondary school, and then we were approached by students saying, hey, we think there's a need in our school for this. So we had a complete rework of our presentation because we had been presenting for a couple of years to adult health and social service providers and a few folks in the faith community. So I think part of our strategy with reaching youth was, transforming our presentation so it was a bit more youth-friendly, right? And being really careful about the content that we shared. In one of our videos, a person says, makes a comment about child welfare, being in foster care, and that this is what happens, right? This is what happens afterwards. So in that setting, and recognizing that there were a lot, it was a big group, recognizing that there are going to be people in that audience that are currently in foster care, right? Or in the child welfare system. So really being explicit about this doesn't mean this is going to be your trajectory. This was the experience of this individual, right? Ensuring that we have proper supports available, so knowing what were the supports that the school could offer, what are the community resources. That was another modification that we made. Taking eliciting questions from them in advance too, so that we could really think about how to respond to their questions in the most appropriate way. We've had a couple of elementary schools reach out to us and did one session where we worked with someone from the school board and the teacher in the classroom. We met with third grade students, and we were able to work with the current curriculum. So they were doing something called identity mapping, which was perfect for See the Person. So they had been working on all of the pieces of their identity and what makes them unique. What is their story, right? And we did that with a person engaged with the campaign. She created an identity map and had a conversation with the children about that. So I think we have to be creative in terms of modifying our messaging a little bit and making it age appropriate. I hope that helps. Thanks.
Any more questions? All right, I'm coming around.
Thank you. Yeah, great presentation, everybody. For the two presenters who have lived experience, I just wanted to know, how did you become comfortable to share your story? I'm interested in that process, or however much you're comfortable sharing. But no, I think I really appreciated the depth of and the vulnerability in sharing that. So I'm interested.
It's kind of funny that these two questions were back to back, because the one thing about children is when I was growing up, I was really into music, and all my idols were all rock stars, and most of the rock stars all dabbled in drugs, have addiction issues, but also so many of them that I read about had beaten that addiction or come through okay on the other end. And you never hear about all the hardships and how difficult it is. All you see is the glamour, and all of a sudden he's sober and everybody admires him and everybody looks up to him and thinks that everything's great. So that's honestly the perception that I had when I was going through my own addiction. Oh, that's nothing. I can get over this. Everybody else gets over it. But how much that it destroys your life and what it does to everything is there's so much to it that you need to express these things. You need to reinforce to kids that it is not what it looks like, that everything that's going to happen to you is going to affect your life greatly, and it's going to ultimately affect your future as well, regardless if you like it or not. So I that's one of the things that I hold in my heart every time that I have a talk, that even if I'm talking to adults, I know that probably some of them are going to be having a conversation with some of their kids, and that we just have to really acknowledge how difficult this life is.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for your response, Brian. For me, it was a little bit different. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I didn't actually feel comfortable sharing for a really long time. I was probably starting my master's degree when I decided it was time that I could probably share my story. I would mention it here or there, but I didn't really like talking about it. I think for me, it was more the perspective of seeing, being a role model, I think, deciding that there weren't a lot of people in my position. I mean, there's probably a lot, but from what I could see and what was being shared with me, I didn't see a lot of people in my position where they had moved past houselessness and were able to like go to school and all of that kind of stuff. So I decided that I should share my story as best as I can. I still struggle with it, honestly. It's definitely hard to reread those moments. And then it's even harder to move out of editing, so let's not talk about that one. But I think a comment from my professor really helped. It was when I was deciding my capstone research topic, and I had told her about my circumstances, and she looked at me and said, "You just changed what I think about unhoused people." And I think in that moment, it really hit me that I'm in a position where I can really start changing that narrative and showing the humanity behind people who have lived those experiences.
Thank you. One final question. It has to be a good one. No? All right. I think we'll close there then. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and for sharing it today.